Hello, existentialist cat. Did I get that right? Interesting questions. Uh, to me, philosophy is really like it's like the programming of the mind. We're figuring out. Only you don't really program the mind. It's something different because our mind isn't really quite like a computer. It's its own sort of thinking machine. Obviously, it's a network. But it's similar enough to a computer as long as we realize I mean something very different. But philosophy is the basic ideas, the fundamental ideas. That's why the philosophy of mathematics is right down there where even the mathematicians don't understand it. So it's all about how we think. It's not really answering questions like why and stuff like that. That's a part of it, but it is just a part. So philosophy is not any of these one philosophies that we're talking about. It's not being a Stoic or being, an Epicurean. It is about the whole workbench, all the tools. And so what we need now, I face the same question you're asking, and I think the answer is we need skepticism and relativism, which unite all the philosophies, which embrace all the philosophies, which encourage learning as many different philosophies as you can, to have them as tools at your disposal. Take a very simple example, liberal and conservative. Should you be liberal or conservative? Well, it sort of depends on your context. If you're lost at sea, you ought to be conservative with what resources you have left. On the other hand, if there's food going to spoil, you ought to share it with the people that need it and not let it rot. And you should be liberal. So the other thing is biases. You can never get rid of biases. It'd be like, picking yourself up by your bootstraps or something. On the other hand, you can get rid of your biases, because you don't really get rid of them, but you can integrate them, and it's all about knowledge. This is just my opinion, of course. It's all about knowledge. If you know what your biases are, then you can take them into account like a scientist would know some of the sources of error and be able to estimate how much error. And so they'll have an answer and say, but, it could be in this bigger region because of the error. You can do that with your biases, and once you admit your biases and see them, then suddenly they just become a part of how you're thinking. And they might not even be bad as biases. Maybe some of the bad part it might wither with the light of day as you admit your bias. But some of the bias will be left over as just, you like chocolate, so when people offer you, candy, you are biased for the chocolate, and that's perfectly fine. And you have knowledge of this. And so the biases don't sneak up and kind of be as noxious as we think of biases. And they become part of how you think. And so they're no longer, they still exist as things that help guide you to certain decisions, but because you're honest and with knowledge of them, they're not really like biases. And so that's two answers. Why we choose a philosophy, I suggest don't. Just use the tools of philosophy, and there's a relativistic philosophy, which is all about piecing the rest of the philosophies together. And it doesn't mean that everything is on its own. No, it's all about comparison. You relate one philosophy to another. It's not about you don't compare philosophies. It's like you have two philosophies and you compare them to each other, and you decide which is better for which situation. So I compared liberal and conservative when you're lost at sea. And so in that context, you can get a particular answer that favors one philosophy in a particular context. Over time, you'll have the big picture. So, and then the second answer was about biases. Yes, it's nice to get rid of biases. You can do a lot in that direction, but you're right, you'll never actually literally get rid of them. In my opinion, of course. All right.